Welcome to the Expansive CEO podcast. I'm your host, Hannah Chapman, founder of Expansive CEO and X Squared Wealth Planning. Buckle in as we explore how to create true prosperity and build a business and a life that expands beyond yourself and makes a dent in the universe.
And I start by...
Yeah, there we go.
So I just wanted to just jump right in before we even started, because before Hannah just hit the record button, we got into this conversation. And as it was starting, I was like, well, I don't want to continue this conversation unless we include this in what we're talking about. You can introduce me and all that stuff, but I just really felt inspired to say this first. Just before we hit the record button, I asked Hannah, I said, I felt like Hannah's been a godsend in my life. We met in Marla's kind of entrepreneurs mastermind, leadership mastermind together. And I just started by going, right when I saw your face, I was like, I feel like you're like this angel that's been put into my life. Like I've never felt this such a sisterly bond, to the point where I was like, I've never felt like someone had my back so much. Like I was like, why is it that you have my back so much? Please tell me what that is. Like, why do you have my back? And then that's how I started the question. And you just started speaking. I was like, wait, let's record this and then continue. So can you start there and then take it over? Because I've hijacked your podcast. Go for it. That's as I do.
Right. No, it's perfect. Yeah. And my response when you interrupted and said, hey, let's start recording, perfect way to do it, was that over the last couple of years, I mean, there've been maybe, somewhere between half a dozen and a dozen people who I've just felt an immediate soul connection with, like an immediate level of knowing, beyond what I can explain. And those people, it's like, I truly have felt that, certain people have been placed in my life to help me grow in different ways, and to be that, like, that beacon of, hey, we can talk about spirituality and business. We can talk about, taking care of ourselves and how important that is, so that we can then take care of the others that depend on us. Because as entrepreneurs, there are so many, right? Like we are these like little centers of our own aura spaces. And my dog is barking. Thank you, Leaf. But besides that, it's just like, I have felt just a really, really strong connection. Marla is another one. Truly, it's like, I don't know what, it's just like we are magnetized to each other. And it was in Marla's, when it was called TNES, the Neuroscience of Ethical Sales. She like paired people up in like, okay, we're going to do little breakout rooms and I'm going to pair you up. And I just had this sense of like, oh, I want to talk to Nima. I don't know if you remember that.
I do.
Right. And you're like,
and you were like,
oh,
I was hoping I'd be paired up with you. I was like,
right?
Oh, really cool.
Why is that? Like, I don't know. Right. Like, so there is that, for me, there's a very intuitive sense of like, I connect with this person. And it's so interesting to hear you say that. Because do you have sisters?
I don't have any sisters.
Yeah.
And I don't have sisters. So I haven't had that experience of, my ex-wife is the closest thing I can consider a sister now. Like my ex-wife, Maria, I just like, if I'm married now, but if she was around, I'd be like, I feel like she's a sister to me, which is weird, which is part of the reason why, the divorce happened. But this is like a true sister. And I feel that way with my cousins and stuff too, but I've never had that experience of having a sister, but I feel that with you.
Mm.
You know, when your family comes to Vancouver, I'd be like, yeah, man, let me show you guys around for sure.
Oh yeah,
So
that trip has to happen because it's just an incredible part of the world. Part of my dreams for my family too. So yes, offer accepted.
awesome.
When that
Awesome.
can happen. Yeah. So, and actually, I think that dovetails really beautifully into the conversation that I want to have today. So the couple of things, I mean, we've been working on some pretty cool stuff, and maybe we can like sort of mention that, but also kind of keep it, not secret, but it's pretty awesome. Um, so we're both really excited about that. And kind of the other topic that was really coming up for me with you is codependence, and
Yes.
how we can be codependent not just with people in relationships, but we
Mm,
can exhibit those same tendencies with money. And
totally.
and how do we then break those
Mm.
bonds? And that's where you, like, your expertise, breaking those bonds of trauma. It is traumatic,
Yeah.
right? We have these deep-seated spaces of trauma where we have experienced money either 0 to 7, when we
Mm-hmm.
like initially have those imprints of what money means to us in the world, what it
Mm-hmm.
means to feel secure and safe, what it
Mm-hmm.
means to be, provided for, or to be a provider. um and that's, set really early. And then in our teens and our early 20s, when we're like figuring it out on our own, there's a lot
Yeah.
of there are a lot of
Christmases, the
right.
way that your parents like attitude towards it, their stress towards it, their beliefs is just downloaded, right? Money
Hmm.
and sex.
Right.
So there are these two like hot topics that are at the core of our wiring in our nervous systems,
Hmm.
and we don't even bring these stories to light because they're too risque to talk about. They're too taboo. They're too
Hmm.
triggering, like politics and religion, sex and money. Like
Yep.
those are the things we don't talk about. But then we get married and we have relationships, and they fall apart because of these two topics, sex and money, the things that we argue about. And so how do we have the conversation of trauma without eventually getting to these topics? So as it turns out, it so happens that me personally, I am really like eyes wide open looking at these topics in my own life, and I'm
Hmm.
in a leadership mastermind, and now we're all talking about it as a community, as a collective, which I'm the only male in. Why, by the way, it's interesting.
Right.
I'm the one guy in a group and a community of like 11, 10 or 11 powerhouse badass women, right? And
Mhm.
so now the topic of sex comes up and money comes up, and we're talking about it amongst one another, and it just so happens this is like what is top of mind in my own inner work. And then this is like, now obviously I integrate what I'm going through and then I teach it to my community. And so you've been a huge part of me formulating what this and unpacking all of this. It's so refreshing to talk to somebody who's at such a high level of intellect and awareness and intelligence, and um, uh, through their education. And so here we are. And it was like, hey, let's talk about it. And let's have a podcast about this topic of our wiring and trauma with money. And if we talk about sex, we talk about sex, but it's really mainly your podcast is about money. So let's jam, sister.
Yeah. And okay, so this is so important though. And I think I want people to understand who you are and what you do in the world and why those two topics are so tied. Because it's true. It's true that, um, I mean, people will talk about sex before they talk about money, truly, right? Or when you get
Mm,
into a relationship, you will have sex
yeah.
before you talk about, how much money you make, or how much you have in your investment accounts, that kind of thing. We hold money so dearly, and we hold so much shame and so much guilt, around both of these topics. And when we when we talk about, from my lens, when we talk about money in relationship, the energy, right, shifts. Like I can feel it. I can feel when people aren't talking to each other. And that almost always, you know, I don't get into, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a sex therapist, and nothing like that. But the way that these two pieces are linked in our own psyches and in our own you know, fear and shame responses, like there is a high degree of correlation, right, between how you view money, how you spend money, and then how you view intimacy and sex and relationships. And, you know, I mean, like we don't have to talk about it that way, but it's really powerful when we do, and we get down to further, more impactful transformation when we open up everything and look at it all together. So, Dr. Nima, please introduce what you do, your company. I just a brief, you know, overview of why this matters to you and how you help people, so that people can then understand, like, oh, this is why they're talking about that. I'd appreciate that.
Well, why does this matter to me? Is your question really? Why does this matter to me? Well, I'm in the world of healing trauma. I started off as a chiropractor and realized that everybody coming in to see me was actually dealing with a stress-related disorder. And if I can make a long story short, I was tired of dealing with symptoms, and I was only able to get so far with patients. And it just led me on this, you know, kind of merging my personal growth work with my care. So I started creating these workshops in my office called Life Skills for a Stressful World. I realized that the way that people were handling stress wasn't very inspiring. And it was impacting the way that they were showing up in the world and the way that their bodies were resolving. And so as I learned more about myself, I would teach it. So it was kind of like I go through shit, I integrate that shit, I figure it out, and then I pass it on to the next person. It just so happens that healthcare kind of area, the healthcare experience, the healthcare setting is a perfect place to have a mind-body connection. So here we go. We're going down this rabbit hole. I have no idea, you know, where I'm going with this, but all I know is that the patients that came in and learned how to become their own medicine got better health outcomes. And fast forward, as I kept going through one relationship problem after another, a divorce and several failed relationships later, I started putting together that attachment trauma, relational attachment trauma, is very intimately tied to our belief about ourselves and who we are and our worthiness. And that downstream creates health outcomes and and informs the choices we make of who we date, who we see, who we observe, who we date. It wasn't until I got into my last relationship that just blew up. It became abusive. We were abusive to one another. And I had to go, wait, how did I get here? How did I get here? How did this happen? Why can't I figure relationships out? How do I make sure that I can resolve this so that I can have healthy relationships? And number three, if I can do number 1 and 2, I'd love to be able to show other people the way, because I haven't been able to figure it out. I thought I'm a smart person. So I went down this rabbit hole of healing my traumas, understanding attachment theory, polyvagal theory, neuroscience, and I learned how to regulate my nervous system and untangle the ties of trauma from my parents that has me living like a child when I'm in my 40s. In other words, not individuating, living under the spell of mommy and daddy's cultural expectations, finally breaking free from that, I was able to finally create a secure relationship. Now I'm married, and this journey of going from that toxic trauma bond to secure relationship, I realize most people are living in trauma bonds. And so now I teach people how to heal from those. And now at this stage, I've realized that if we don't talk about sex and money, we're not complete, because those are those outcomes in our lives, which we, all have problems in some form. There's a shame component to it, is all from our traumas. So I was never talking about money and sex before, because it's like, what am I? I'm a chiropractor. I don't have any, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not a sex therapist, but it's like, you can't ignore it.
Yeah.
So this was the journey. And so that's why I love teaching it, because I teach what I most needed to learn. And
Right.
so healing from my trauma bonds, healing from these addictions and codependencies to sex and money is what's top of my mind. And I look around and everybody and their mother is struggling with it. So that's why it's important to me.
Yeah, it's so powerful. And I've said this before as well, is that like the most powerful way that we can guide is to lead through what we've been through.
Mm.
And
Mm.
that's where the wisdom comes from the applied knowledge, right? Like we can learn and read and listen. And I am like a voracious reader and listener, and I know you are as well. But until we feel it, until we apply it, until we embody that knowledge and actually utilize it, that's when it becomes wisdom.
Mm.
And it's so powerful, to
Mm.
you don't have to be, and I think this is sometimes when newer entrepreneurs hear that, they'll get frustrated, or when 20 somethings hear that, they get frustrated. They're like, well, I
Mm.
know what to do, right? Like, it's like, yes, keep going, keep doing every step that you know to take, and there truly is power in overcoming your obstacles and then being able to guide people from that side.
Mm.
If you're worried about it and you're 23, just it's okay. Just keep moving. By the time you're 38, by the time you're 45, like, watch out. You're going to have so much
Yeah,
applied knowledge that will be turned into wisdom by then, right?
totally.
And I love what you said about being, finally, in your 40s, like getting to that place of like, oh, I'm feeling good, because that's, man, I felt the same way I'm in my late 30s now. I'll be 40 in not this year, I'll be 39. I'll be
Mm-hmm.
40 next year. And everything is just like, oh yeah, this is where
Well,
we're supposed to be going. It's like clicking.
well, it's just getting to know who it is that you are,
Mm-hmm.
getting to know who it is you are. Who are you? Right. And who am I, aside from all of these masks that I put on in order to feel safe and accepted by the tribe, the
Mm-hmm.
culture, the family system. And so it's kind of like we are all on this hero's journey where we've abandoned ourselves in order to be safe. And then all of a sudden, um, we abandon ourselves in order to be safe. And now that gets us to a place where we have a financial collapse. There's affairs, there's addictions, and
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like this wake up call that happens. And we have it all in our own way. Many people have a financial collapse or a crisis of identity. And what happens is now we're called on to figure out who the hell we are. And that's a
Mm-hmm.
hero's journey. And it's painful to take off the mask. But essentially, this is this is our journey. And so it feels good, but you got to go through hell in order to get to that place where you're like, all right, this is who I am. And this is how I'm going to live according to a life of design, not of duty.
Yes. So the other aspect that I wanted to open up, that when you explained it to me the first time, I was like, oh, I had heard the term trauma bond before, and not like completely understanding what that meant. I pictured it in my head as like, okay, here's two people and they're bonded by trauma, right? Like a band between them, between two humans. And then when you said trauma bonds are bonding to the trauma, we're bonded to the trauma, I was like,
Yeah.
hold on a second.
Yeah.
Wait a
It's
minute.
what it feels like when I'm working with people.
Right.
It's this conscious desire to be somewhere, to grow, to break free, but this unconscious pull to the familiar that we don't want to break free from. It's this experience of saying, I never, ever, ever want to be with somebody like my dad. I never want to marry someone like my mother. I want the exact opposite, but then pairing with somebody who ends up being exactly like them, because trauma bonding, this isn't the clinical term for it, but it is an experience, an energy of, it's an energetic pull of so that we can have a sense of healing and completion. And with money, it could be like constantly repeating patterns of saying, I want to be wealthy. But then once you get to a certain pattern, once you get to a certain level, you do something to kind of squander it, and you go back down. And what is that? Well, there's something, we're bonded to our trauma. And if you unpack that, it could be, well, look, if I really make it big, then these people, my society around me, they're going to judge me. They're going to judge me as bad. They're going to look down on me because rich people are really, really like evil. And so the second that I have this opportunity to jump to the next level, I'm going to squander it.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's essentially a trauma bond. And it is so difficult to break free from. It's so difficult. It takes heroic levels of strength to energetically move into and lean into the discomfort of choosing a new identity. The trauma bond becomes an identity that we don't even know that we are. We say we want to have mature, healthy, emotionally stable partner, but then when one shows up, we're like, ew, get me away from that. But let me go after the unavailable one. Ooh, there's something so familiar about that. That's the trauma bond. And so the trauma bond technically is a cycle of, the love bombing. Oh my God, this is the most amazing thing, to devaluing and then discarding. So that's essentially what a trauma bond is. And we all have it. And what I've discovered is that if you want a really amazing life where you're having, good sex with a committed partner, and you're actually feeling engaged with it after children, and you want to be able to earn a good living and have more money at the end of the month than month at the end of the money, and more money at the end of your life than life at the end of your money, then it's really important for us to untangle from these clutches of these bonds of trauma that we're unconsciously, through no fault of our own, connected to. So I'm all in with doing that for myself and taking my community and doing that. So should I stay or go in this job? Should I stay or go in this relationship? This is kind of, the trauma bond. It's like, how do I break free from that? And so I'm all in with teaching people how to do that.
Oh, so when you said, describe the love bombing cycle, say that one more time. And then, I'm going to say what came up, just the cycle, the love bombing, then.
Yeah. So during a trauma bond in a relationship perspective, I know you always listen to what I'm saying and you're like, oh, I can just apply that to money.
Right.
That's how you do this. I love that you do that. It's like I'm telling the story of trauma bonds with relationships, and then you're like, oh my God, that's the same for money. That's why I love talking to you. So in the beginning phases of a trauma bond, you have two people who are, you know, trying to complete what was incomplete in their childhood through one another. So it's usually the narcissist and the codependent. They're two roles. I don't want to label people, but they're two roles, same wound expressed in a different form. So the narcissist love bombs the shit out of the codependent and just basically, oh my God, you're so amazing. You're so beautiful. You're like the most incredible thing. Wow. Like, whoa, you're so fantastic, amazing, whatever. So the codependent then all of a sudden becomes high off of the supply and is like starts to love herself through the gaze of the narcissist. I use she and he. It's both. It can happen both ways, but I'm just going to use that for the sake of kind of the example. And she's like, oh my God, it was love at first sight. No, it wasn't love at first sight. It was, you didn't fall in love with him or them. You fell in love with the idealized version of yourself. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, I love me, you know? And so now what happens essentially is the narcissist, through the love bombing, through the flowers and the trips and the whatever, all of a sudden it's this experience of finally, I feel unconditionally loved the way I never had. Right. And then over time, once the narcissist feels like they've got you, because it's kind of like they strike a deal. I'm going to love you like your mother never did. And in exchange, you're going to love me the same. And the way that I'm going to prove to you that you're going to love me the same as a mother would, it's like a co-mother. It's like a dual mothership, co-pedestalization, where you didn't get your needs met as a child, but I'm going to give that to you through love bombing. And then in exchange, you're going to do that for me. Okay. You're going to do that for me. And what you're going to do, how am I going to prove it to you? Well, I'm going to abuse you. I'm going to devalue you. I'm going to say, geez, you weren't what I thought you were. And I'm going to discard you. And you're still got to prove to me that you still love me like a mother would. I want to make sure that you'll still be with me regardless. The trauma bond happens from the abrupt transition from love bombing to devaluing. That becomes like an intermittent reinforcement to the codependent. It's like, but I thought I was good. I thought I was lovable. I thought I was good. Let me do whatever it takes to get back to that. Right. And so it's this cycle. Then what happens is finally I'm done. I'm going to leave. And then finally, when you leave, the narcissist then says, no. Their abandonment wound shows up, says, no, come back. You're the greatest thing. I don't want to lose you, whatever. And then lo and behold, they got you back. And the cycle continues, and you go through this cycle of love bombing, devalue, discard. And I think that there's probably an equivalent with money, isn't there? Do you want to share that?
Yes. Yeah. The love bombing, devaluement, discard. The first thing that came to mind was in job settings, right? Like that same process can happen of like being so excited, being so passionate about an idea, all in. And then, when we don't, right, when we don't get that same level of enthusiasm back, right, we go through that same cycle and then we discard. Oh, nope, that didn't work. That idea wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's almost the inner cycle of that happening, right? When we've experienced that over and over in our outer relationships, then we start to do that interior, right? So it doesn't, that almost then pulls me back into that idea of, when you leave that relationship, okay, yeah, that's a terrible relationship. And when you go into the next one, you're going to do the same thing because you're doing that circle inside of yourself And so
Mm-hmm.
that's what's going to
So
repeat.
it's with a job. Oh my God, this is the greatest job ever. And then
Mm-hmm.
God, it wasn't what I really thought it was, and I'm out of here. It's this,
Right.
and this happens when we put things on a pedestal, when we don't have a
Mm-hmm.
balanced perspective of things, and we're looking for heroes outside of ourselves.
Right.
Maybe the job is going to save me,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what'll happen 100 times out of 100 when we're guided from externals rather than internals. And that's a spiritual journey. So to
Mm-hmm.
heal from this trauma bond is 100%, and with money as well, and jobs and whatever, is a 100% spiritual journey.
Yes. Yes. Because, and we can say, internal, right? You can say
Mm-hmm.
it's an internal journey.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it is a spiritual journey. I know some people cringe at that, wording. And so if that's you, guess what? It's just knowing yourself. It's
Exactly.
it's understanding your motivations and your responses, being aware of how you allow your outside world to either validate you or invalidate you.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
then, releasing that. I feel like, um, we do that, we do it in jobs. And then a lot of times with entrepreneurs, it's that they experience that so many times in the workforce that, okay, well, I'm just going to do it on my own. And then they repeat their sabotaging patterns in the
Mm.
same way in their own business, right? And then they pull these things to them, these traumas again, like they start growing in revenue, things are doing well, and then they start to ignore their clients,
Yeah.
and the clients get upset and they leave, and then it's like, oh
Yeah.
my god, how did this happen, right?
Yeah.
um well, it's not that you were consciously trying to do less do a disservice to your clients. It's that you were unconsciously pulling these circumstances to you so that you could continue in that cycle. And that doesn't feel good. Like you were saying, it doesn't feel good to realize. And so we have to, when we hold that mirror up, or when we have a mentor or a coach or a client, anyone who will hold that mirror up,
Mm.
we have to be willing to look at it
Mm.
and not immediately try to fix and repair, not immediately go into, I'm so sorry, I'll do anything, right? Like that's the typical cycle. The typical cycle is we just, like tumble all the way back down to square
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
instead, it's like, how do we look at, take an honest assessment of where we're
Mm-hmm.
at, become aware,
Mm-hmm.
accept it, awareness, then acceptance, and
Mm-hmm.
then
Yeah.
make a new choice.
Yeah. It takes devotion. It's a devotional practice.
Mm-hmm.
It's a wake-up call. The beauty of the wake-up call is that it's like, okay, it gives you enough of a pain where you get to look and go, all right, what am I missing here? If you're wise, most people just want to play the victim. Oh, it was
Right.
the boss, it was the other
Mm-hmm.
person. That's where we begin. We begin as victims. Oh my
Blaming.
gosh, and blaming the other person. And of course, it's not about blaming victims either. This is about just acknowledging the pain that we're in and how we felt hurt by another person. And then there comes a point where there's an invitation to really step up,
Yeah.
to really step it up, and um to go, all right, I don't want to live in this planet in a way where I'm governed by things outside of me.
Mm-hmm.
How do I now create? How do I become a creator? And so it calls upon us to kind of ascend beyond the victimhood and say, all right, so where was my unconscious dance that led here, which involves us going back into our history, into our traumas and our parents' traumas and their parents, and cultural. And we got to become sociologists, neurologists, psychologists. And
Right.
that's basically what I had to do. I woke up, I was like, what the hell? I got to understand, how do I heal from this? How do I have healthy relationships? Well, I had to become a sociologist and understand the culture that I was born into, and then a psychologist, not so much, but just to understand the mechanisms behind behavior and the nervous system, and go, all right, so how do I apply energy to take this trauma energy and move it up and alchemize it
Right.
into, and channel it and direct it into the influencing the future? Because that's what power is. Power is the ability to influence, to take energy and influence it into creating something of your own design. That's what power is.
Mm.
We have that available to us with relationships, with our sexuality, with money. We have that. We just haven't, I just never took the time to study and practice it. And when I did, all of a sudden, massive different results in my life, financially, and without the hustle, and in my relationship, with sexuality, even after having a 2-year-old. That's why it became so important to me, is like, I have a 1-year-old now, and I'm having less sex now than I did all my life. And I don't want to have to turn to pornography and to turn to my old coping strategies in order to get those needs met, because I feel ashamed of these parts because of my upbringing. I'm going to look at it, I'm going to confront it, and I'm going to create an amazing sexual connection with my wife and channel that into my marriage and creativity instead of those old coping patterns.
Yes. And that is, first of all, so beautiful. And I think what anyone in, in a committed partnership, or who desires a committed partnership, it's so fundamental, and it's so hard to achieve. If you look at any relationship board on Reddit, or, I mean, like, it's so out there that, like, oh, that's not possible. That you can't maintain that level of intimacy, because it's not just sexual, it's also emotional, right? That, the intimacy of, like, being open and available and vulnerable with your partner, and keeping that bond sacred, right? And not using all the, the coping strategies that you're talking about, because then that harms the relationship. But when we aren't like, when we don't feel, there are parts of us that we don't love, and we don't feel like we can be open and talk to our partners about that. Again, this goes exactly with money as well. Like, just plop money right into the middle. When we feel like we can't be open, we won't be understood, that's when it's like, okay, I'm just going to go do it on my own. Either way. Right? Sex and money.
Sex and money. Can you give me an example of doing it on your own with money? Because sex is obvious. It's like, you're going to go use whatever affairs or whatever, but what's the equivalent in money?
Yeah. So, I mean, to your exact same point, I mean, this is a place where I have, struggled to feel open and loved and accepted, and, like, fully able to say, hey, this is really important to me. This is what it costs. And I know this is the next step for me.
Right.
And
being
so,
open to receiving more and feeling worthy of receiving it.
yes. And so for me, it was that financial decision making, especially in starting my business and choosing to start coaching with someone, and not being fully transparent with my husband about the costs. And that,
so hiding.
right.
Oh my gosh. Now that you say that, wow, how many times, like, one client I was working with was like shopping like 30 grand a month on like Amazon, just addicted to shopping and hiding,
right.
Hiding stuff, not being, I guess anytime we're not being transparent with one another,
Yeah.
with sex or money, You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? It's like, what am I hiding? And there's no transparency with, oh, I'm hiding this from you because I don't trust you, or I'm shopping. Don't tell my partner. You know, there's some people, clients that actually are working with, and they're like, okay, I'm not going to tell my husband, but I'm using this or that. And it's like, ooh,
Right.
that doesn't feel really good. And
Right.
so we all are carrying a shame story with these two topics. And
Mm-hmm.
what's important to know is that that shame story is blocking abundance.
Yep.
It's blocking
Absolutely.
prosperity because because we're, you know, it's out of integrity. So it ends up, oh, anything out of integrity always ends up blowing up in my face.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's a matter of time, you know. So um good point. I never thought of that. That's so true and so common.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, sex and money. That's a good question for anybody who's listening to ask, is how transparent are we with our desires,
Yeah.
with ourselves? What story do we have about my desires? Oh, I'm selfish to want that. Oh, that makes
Mm-hmm.
me unlovable, or it makes me dirty, or I'm filthy, so I'm going to hide that. And so how many marriages, how many relationships are kind of it, cloaked with secrecy, silence, and shame
Mm-hmm.
because of that? And
Yes. Yeah.
wow,
Yeah. And
like,
that's that financial piece. I mean, it feels, again, when you go back to what we said kind of at the beginning, like people will talk about sex before they'll talk about money, and people don't want to talk about sex, right? Like they don't want to talk about that either.
people will talk about sex before they'll talk about money, and they won't even talk about sex.
Right.
So
Yeah. So
people won't talk. Yeah.
the financial betrayal feels worse
Oh
sometimes
yeah.
than even, an affair.
Yeah,
Not.
I mean, when you look at how that feels, it's material.
Mhm.
It's like an attack at your body, at your physical body, because it's the material. It's pure material. It's sustenance.
Mhm.
And when there's a financial betrayal, it's like you've taken away. There's like you've got this gambling issue, you've got this spending issue.
Mhm.
It's an attack on your body. It feels like a physical attack,
Yeah.
you
It
know?
does. It does. Yeah. And I mean,
Powerful.
from, in my own experience of, like making decisions on my own, that I felt, right, like I should include him, and I felt like he would be like, "You're crazy. Absolutely not." So there was
Mm.
that part of me, right? Like there were so many parts of me that were like needed that love, that acceptance, that reassurance, and couldn't handle, felt like they couldn't handle any sort of rejection. Like if you reject this, then I'm not strong enough to then stand up for myself yet.
Yeah, yeah. We don't have that. I wrote this down yesterday, actually. I was just kind of journaling and making notes. Um, this is a really big thing. I know it sounds like it's small, but look how big this is that we don't have a tolerance um for our partner to be angry or displeased with us.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Because of this intolerance, we abandon ourselves, because if we feel rejected, we're fearing abandonment, and so that then causes uh, uh, us to be dishonest. So essentially, the fear of abandonment,
Oh yeah,
which is a
definitely.
trauma,
Mhm.
is at the root of every one of our lies and deceits.
Mhm.
so
Absolutely. Yeah.
so if so people are like, I want healthy relationships, I want so and so, and we think that it comes on the outside. But what I do with the work that I do is I go after that fear of abandonment. And
Mhm.
if you go directly to that and deal with that directly and heal that directly, which there's a pathway to do, and you got to get the body involved. It can't just be talking about it. Once you get there, the mask comes off, both with
Mhm.
work, both with money, and with sex and relationships. And now all of a sudden, I'm not afraid of you leaving,
Right.
which means I can take off the mask and be real with you. And that's where authenticity comes. So we, so this whole addressing the abandonment wound, which we all are carrying in some form, it's part of the collective. If we just go there and we put all our focus there, which is the focus of my work, magical relationships happen because you can be truthful. Like I know that, you know, you would tell me when something's come up. I trust in my, 6 months that I've known you, 5 months that I've known you, that if you have a problem with something that I said to you in my relationship to you, you'll be like, hey, Nima, can we talk? Yeah. Yeah. The other day, whatever you said, it really rubbed me the wrong way. And I just wanted to address it with you because my relationship with you is important. I'll be like, thanks for telling me. Wow. Okay. Because you don't feel, you've reached a level of awareness and of growth that you'd rather lose my friendship than, and I know that about you, I could feel that about you, you'd rather lose my friendship than to lose your own soul within this friendship. And that's the only type of friend that I want.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Does that make sense? And that's how secure relationships are formed. It's the ability of me to go, look, what you said there wasn't cool. Can I address that with you? And then the way that, if you address that with me, the way that I respond to you will tell you if I'm welcome in your life. If I'll go, what? If I turn it around on you and go, screw you. Well, you know what? Well, you said this and I totally have you feeling unheard. Well, now you know Nima's not a great person to have in my life. Right. And you'll be able to go, well, I'm glad that we had this conversation because I just shared something vulnerable with you without attacking, but I just wanted to feel heard. But because that wasn't available to you, maybe this friendship isn't a wise decision. And now we found that out. But now at least you have the blueprint for a secure relationship. And that is the most important thing in the world to me. I'm 47 years old now at the recording of this. I've gone through all of the things of, millionaire, chiropractic practice, trophy wife, all of that, great sex and whatever. And now I realize the most important thing is secure relationships with clients, with my work, with my audience, with my friends, with my coworkers, with, brothers and sisters on the climb, as you are with me. And if I don't have that, then all the other stuff doesn't matter. So I've shifted my sights on creating that and then teaching other people who want to do the same.
And in that, you're also building a business that is phenomenal, right? That's
It's
the
been doing
magic.
great.
That's the
Yeah,
magic.
it's been doing great. It's better than it's ever been. And it's not because, I don't have stress or whatever. It's been a very challenging time because I'm still trying to break free in this recording of this. I'm a few weeks away from finally breaking free from a trauma bond. My ex partner that kind of was the friendly soul that helped awaken me to this work. It's the finishing touches on kind of untangling from that in the court system, family court, which is great. And it hasn't been easy, but through that, which would take many people out,
Right.
I've created it's just become very profitable and prosperous. And it's growing because of that. So I'm just committed to the process itself. The path is what's fun for me.
Yes, I love that. I love that. And I agree so much that, as we just continue to work on and look at the material, because it gets harder, it gets scarier, right? As we get up, like the stuff that like, ooh, like that we were keeping hidden, it gets a little more gnarly. And then as we get better at looking at it, right, then it's like, oh, but I can still handle this. I've got my own back. So we are right at nearly at the top of the hour. And thank you so much for being here and having this conversation with me. I think this is going to just like blow some minds. Because I know when in our conversations, when it's like sex and money, and we can just talk about how much um, how similar they are. It's just,
Hmm.
when we draw the connections and when we start to share, that's when it starts to really become
Yeah.
clear for others.
Yeah.
So,
It's like a meeting of the minds, and you've been dropping in these concepts. And I'm like, wow, that totally fits with relationship. And then you bring in the money thought. I'm like, wow. And it's a neat model
mhm.
is emerging from this. And I really love the process. So,
Yeah,
you
me
know,
too. Me
yeah,
too. I look forward to continuing to collaborate with you and sharing this message of breaking through our trauma bonds and just going inside over and over and over again, to become like the best version of who we are. So,
yeah,
yes, please, yes, tell us how people can reach you,
yeah.
and what's coming
Well,
up next.
yeah, I'm putting together a 3-day event for people that are looking to create that satisfaction in those two areas, sex and money, where they felt stalled and stymied. It's called Rewire, and it's
Mhm.
3 intensive days. It's a Friday, Saturday, and a Sunday. It's in March, and I can, you know, I'll give you the link to give, and people who are keen can get a 10% discount just for being in your audience with a code.
Awesome.
And what happens is day one is about trauma, and we unpack your trauma story,
Mm,
your attachment traumas, and how they've been impacting, you know, really what you feel you deserve. Essentially, it's a conversation about deserving. And those who do the VIP ticket get to have lunch with Dr. John DeMartini, where we talk about the neuroscience of deserving.
mm,
And day two, for those VIP peeps, there's laser coaching with me. I kind of listen, there's a Q&A, and then I give them some feedback on their specific thing. And there's all sorts of goodies and bonuses for those who do that. But essentially, day two is about rewiring our conversation internally about sex. And
mm,
then day three is about money. So 3 intensive days where from Friday to Sunday, you walk away and you feel an embodied shift in your body
mm,
about your story about trauma, sex, and money, about your sense of deserving.
mm,
And I can't wait. It's brand new. And so the peeps who jump in get, it's kind of like in exchange for feedback on it, it's like a half price type of ticket. So those are for the peeps that are really like, they're really wanting to dive in and have uncomfortable conversations. And then we're going to have breakout rooms. It's on
mm.
Zoom. So you're going to have breakout rooms where you're going to be listening to other people. There's 200 people. It's limited to the first come, first serve, 200. And I can't wait. It's going to happen. I can't wait. And I'd love for you to come too. So I'd love to, make sure that you're coming, and if you're keen and you're interested. But
Absolutely. Yeah.
this is what's happening. This is what's up.
Yay. This is going to be an amazing event. Like, it's transformational. And I know it's just the first step in the process, but like really getting clear on that first step is absolutely powerful. So thank you again for being here, Nima. I am so thankful to have you in my life as well. Yeah, we'll see you
Thanks
next
so
time.
much. Yeah.
That's it for this episode. Thanks for listening, and be sure to like and subscribe. And again, if anything resonated with you from this episode, I would love to hear from you. Email me at Hannah, HANNAH, at expansiveceo.com and tell me about it. And if you're ready for your greatest expansion, you can find ways to work with me at expansiveceo.com and at x2wealthplanning.com. That's X, the numeral 2, wealthplanning.com. So until next time, remember that there is enough. You are enough. And your birthright in this lifetime is to be expansive.